Hey, good afternoon, everybody. It is September 26, 2023. We are in the Old Testament, and we are reading from the book of 2 Samuel. We're going to read chapter 15, verse 13 to chapter 16, verse 14 today. Okay. All right, so we're in the aftermath of David's sin with Bathsheba and the murder of Uriah. He's already lost one son, which was the son he had with Bathsheba that came out of that adulterous relationship. He had another son that was killed by one of his other sons, which was Absalom. And Absalom fled. David brought him back to Jerusalem, but wouldn't talk to him. All this time, Absalom is brooding and plotting and planning. And finally, we see that he had a devious plan where he would go to the gates and he would meet all the people that were coming to see the king, and he would kind of downplay David and say, wow, you got a really good case. If the king weren't so busy he couldn't hear you, he would hear you and he would decide for you. So he brings all the people to his side, and he goes off to the Mount Hebron and he lures, well, I wouldn't say necessarily lures, but for some reason Ahithophel, who is David's chief advisor, decides he's going to support Absalom's coup attempt, and they all go to Hebron. Ahithophel declares him king. All the people say, okay. And now they're coming back to Jerusalem to press this claim. But David decides, okay, I'm going to flee. Not sure why. Maybe there were more coming with his son Absalom than he had soldiers left in Jerusalem to protect himself. I don't know, but it seems like it was a pretty big people's revolt. And we saw that David, we're getting towards the end of his life. We saw Eli when he got to the end of his life. His sons kind of ran wild. Samuel's sons kind of ran wild. Well, Saul's sons didn't necessarily run wild, but they all died in battle. So David is kind of going the same way Eli and Samuel did, that his sons are starting to get out of hand. And David decides he's going to flee. A few things happen. Zadok and the priests, they bring the ark with them and say, all right, we're going to go with you. And David says, no, you know what? David understands, the power is not the ark, the power is with God. And if God's going with me, God's going with me. But the ark should stay in the tent and the tabernacle. It should stay in Jerusalem. That's where it belongs. And then he sends the priests back with Zadok and says, you know what? You guys go back. I need eyes and ears in Jerusalem to tell me what's going on so we can assess this situation. So he sends them back. A few other people want to come with him, and he says, no, I want you to go back. You know what? My best advisor is with him. I need you guys to kind of counteract what he's saying. We get Zimri, a descendant of Saul, a Benjamite. He starts cursing him and spitting him out, and we see that, our David of old says, hey, you know what? If he wants to curse me out, he can curse me out. If his curses are true, if his curses are coming from God, they're going to come true. If they're not, God is going to punish him. So we're starting to see that David of old come back, and I think that kind of speaks to I know it speaks to me, probably a lot of you. That seems to be how we kind of relate to God. When we're in trouble, we're praying for God, we're leaning on God. But when times are good, we tend to forget it, and that's kind of what David did. When he was that early warrior battling Saul, it was all about God and chasing after his will. And then he became king, and there was peace, and he had less to worry about, and his focus shifted from God and started to shift to himself, and that's when he started getting in trouble. And now that we're seeing, crisis show up again, he's going right back to God, which is good, other than that part that we shouldn't, it's hard for a rich man to get into heaven. Why? Because we start thinking that we're really pretty. Hey, I am kind of pretty good, and and I don't really have anything to worry about. So maybe I don't necessarily need to chase after God. Well, you always have to chase after God. God is first in the good times and the bad times, and that gets us in trouble. I know it gets me in trouble, like I said. So we're seeing that play out here. So David is now starting to become that hungry warrior, depending on God and trusting that God is leading him where he needs to be, and that God's fighting his battles for him. We see Ziba, Mephibosheth's servant. Okay, Mephibosheth was Jonathan's son. that David promised to take care of. He shows up with a bunch of donkeys and a bunch of provisions, and David says, well, where's Mephibosheth? And Ziba tells him a story of, oh, well, he's supporting Absalom. I snuck away with all this stuff to give to you. And David says, all right, well, then you get everything I promised to give to Mephibosheth, since you're still loyal to me. And he appears not to be, and I'm going to say he appears not to be, because we're going to come back to all these stories in a little as we progress through this. So let's go ahead and we're going to read 2 Samuel chapter 15, verse 13 to 16:14. Now a messenger came to David, saying, the hearts of the men of Israel are with Absalom. So David said to all his servants who were with him at Jerusalem, arise and let us flee, or we shall not escape from Absalom. Make haste to depart, lest he overtake us suddenly and brings disaster upon us, and strikes the city with the edge of the sword. And the king's servants said to the king, we are your servants, ready to do whatever my lord the king commands. Then the king went out with all his household after him, but the king left 10 women, concubines, to keep the house. And the king went out with all the people after him and stopped at the outskirts. Then all his servants passed before him, and all the Cherethites, and all the Pelethites, and all the Gittites, 600 men who had followed him from Gath, passed before the king. Then the king said to Ittai the Gittite, why are you also going with us? Return and remain with the king, for you are a foreigner and also an exile from your own place. In fact, you came only yesterday. Should I make you wander up and down with us today, since I go? I know not where. Return and take your brethren back. Mercy and truth be with you. But Ittai answered the king and said, as the Lord lives and as my lord the king lives, surely in whatever place my lord the king shall be, whether in death or life, even there also your servant will be. So David said to Ittai, go and cross over. Then Ittai the Gittite and all his men and all the little ones who were with him crossed over. And all the country wept with a loud voice, and all the people crossed over. The king himself also crossed over the brook of Kidron, and all the people crossed over toward the way of the wilderness. There was a duke also, and all the Levites with him, bearing the ark of the covenant of God. They set down the ark of God, and Abiathar went up until all the people had finished crossing over from the city. Then the king said to Zadok, carry the ark of God back into the city. If I find favor in the eyes of the Lord, he will bring me back and show me both it and his dwelling place. But if he says thus, I have no delight in you, here I am. Let him do to me as he seems good to him. The king also said to Zadok the priest, are you not a seer? Return to the city in peace, and your 2 sons with you, Ahimaaz and your son, and Jonathan the son of Abiathar. See, I will wait in the plains of the wilderness until word comes from you to inform me. Therefore Zadok and Abiathar carried the ark of God back to Jerusalem, and they remained there. So David went by the ascent of the Mount of Olives, and wept as he went up. And he had his head covered, and went barefoot, and all the people who were with him covered their heads, and went up, weeping as they went up. Then someone told David, saying, Ahithophel is among the conspirators with Absalom. And David said, O Lord, I pray, turn the counsel of Ahithophel into foolishness. Now it happened, when David had come to the top of the mountains where he worshipped God, there was Hushai the Arachite coming to meet him, with his robe torn and dust on his head. David said to him, if you go on with me, then you will become a burden to me. But if you return to the city and say to Absalom, I will be your servant, O king, as I was your father's servant previously, so I will now also be your servant, then you may defeat the counsel of Ahithophel for me. And do you not have Zadok and Abiathar the priests with you there? Therefore it will be that whatever you hear from the king's house, you shall tell to Zadok and Abiathar the priests. Indeed, they have there with them their 2 sons, Ahimaaz, Zadok's son, and Jonathan, Abiathar's son, and by them you shall send me everything you hear. So Hushai, David's friend, went into the city, and Absalom came into Jerusalem. When David was a little past the top of the mountain, there was Ziba, the servant of Mephibosheth, who met him with a couple of saddled donkeys, and on them 200 loaves of bread, 100 clusters of raisins, 100 summer fruits, and a skin of wine. And the king said to Ziba, what do you mean to do with these? So Ziba said, the donkeys are for the king's household to ride on, the bread and the summer fruit for the young men to eat, and the wine for those who are faint in the wilderness to drink. Then the king said, and where is your master's son? And Ziba said to the king, indeed, he is staying in Jerusalem, for he said, today the house of Israel will restore the kingdom of my father to me. So the king said to Ziba, here are all that belongs to Mephibosheth is yours. And Ziba said, I humbly bow before you, that I may find favor in your sight, my lord, O king. Now when King David came to Bahurim, there was a man from the family of the house of Saul, whose name was Shimei, the son of Gera, coming from there. He came out cursing continuously as he came, and he threw stones at David and at all the servants of King David. And all the people and all the mighty men were on his right hand and on his left. Also Shimei said thus when he cursed, come out, you bloodthirsty man, you rogue, the Lord has brought upon you all the blood of the house of Saul, in whose place you have reigned, and the Lord has delivered the kingdom into the hand of Absalom your son. So now you are caught in your own evil, because you are a bloodthirsty man. Then Abishai the son of Zeruiah said to the king, why should this dead dog curse my lord the king? Please let me go over and take off his head. But the king said, what have I to do with you, you son of Zeruiah? So let him curse, because the Lord has said to him, curse David. Who then shall say, why have you done so? And David said to Abishai and all his servants, see how my son, who came from my own body, seeks my life. How much more, how may this Benjamite? Let him alone and let him curse, for so the Lord has ordered him. It may be that the Lord will look on my affliction, and that the Lord will repay me with good for his cursing this day. And as David and his men went along the road, Shimei went along and the hillside opposite him, and cursed as he went, threw stones at him, and kicked up dust. Now the king and all the people who were with him became weary, so they refreshed themselves there. May God bless the reading of his word, and may God bless you. Bye.